Hello and welcome to The Dojo, a search marketing podcast from Exposure Ninja. I'm Charlie, Exposure Ninja CEO, and today I am joined by special guest Luke Nicholson, who is COO and coming out from behind the scenes for his very first podcast appearance. Hey Luke, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for allowing me to step out of the shadows and into the limelight. I'm very excited to be here today.
Great, looking forward to our conversation. So we're talking about this $14 billion hole that is the predicted loss for OpenAI, which is ChatGPT's parent company, and actually just what the hell's going on over at OpenAI. So last week, there were reports that OpenAI has closed Sora, their video generating software, which was costing around $1 million every day to run for what is, for OpenAI, a very small user base of 500,000 users. Luke, what do you think's going on? Why have they closed Sora? How much money are they losing?
Yeah, so we're seeing reports that OpenAI is losing 3 times more than it makes at the moment. So although OpenAI has an absolute ton of money, like a pile of cash that they're sitting on, it isn't infinite. And also, I think the real underlying story here is OpenAI, we've seen them instruct their lawyers. They're thinking about their IPO in Q4. I think that they want to have the public investors. They want some good news for those guys. They want to be able to point to some revenue increases. And I think that the real story here is finally OpenAI is going to start focusing on the ad side of things. And there are a couple of different reasons why we can think that that's pretty much going to be the case.
And why is that? Why do you think they're suddenly doubling down on the ad side of things? Especially, it was only the week before last that they decided to close their instant checkout, which was allowing e-commerce checkouts to happen directly in the ChatGPT chats managed by OpenAI. And now we think they're pushing even harder towards the ad side.
Yeah, it's time for OpenAI to start making some proper money. So at the moment, they are making much less than they're spending. So that's a situation that no business wants to be in indefinitely. And although OpenAI isn't in a hurry to be super profitable, reports are saying that they're targeting profitability by about 2029. There are signs now that they're beginning to take it much more seriously than previously. And the moves that we're seeing are around advertising. And there are 2 in particular that really show us that they're taking it seriously. And that's 2 people that they've hired. They've hired Dave Duggan, who will be the new VP and head of global ads at OpenAI. And they've also hired Fij Simo, who it will be CEO of applications. Both of those guys are veterans from Meta. They were instrumental in building Meta into the juggernaut that it is now, especially the ad side of things. And the fact that OpenAI has gone after those 2 tells us that their top priority at the moment is building that ad platform. We're also seeing OpenAI, it's launched its beta ads feature at the moment. So one of our clients actually is on the waitlist to get in on that. And I think that they want to have that up and running and at least having those early signs of growth ahead of the IPO in Q4 of 2026.
It's funny though, because they've come under fire in the news very recently about those ads that they've been running, the ones they've been testing in beta so far, not actually providing an ROI. And one of the big news stories that hit was that Walmart's VP, Daniel Danker, was like, these ads are just not working. He basically, the TLDR is, called them a flop and said that shoppers were just not completing those purchases inside the ChatGPT interface. They would rather just navigate to Walmart's website.
News like that is absolutely terrifying for OpenAI. That is not what you want to see as the CEO ahead of an IPO that was at one stage rumored to be, the biggest in world history. And that huge IPO that they're going after is completely dependent on having an ad platform that functions. I think that previously OpenAI has underestimated how difficult it is to make ads a functioning part of the overall system. And now they're beginning to realize, oh wait, this is not just a nice add-on that we can put on at any moment that suits us. this is actually something that is a major part of the overall experience for the user, and it has to really drive results for the advertiser. If you remember early on, when OpenAI started talking about ads, they were really, really focused on the user and how the ads wouldn't really interfere with the experience for the user. But, as somebody who works a lot with advertisers, I was thinking, this is really, you've got to make sure there's something for the advertiser there as well. Otherwise, there won't be advertisers on the platform at all. If you make the ads so unobtrusive that they don't work, then no advertiser is going to be on the platform. And so I think that this is what we're seeing now, is the realization this is a huge piece of work. It actually has a massive set of implications for our business, and we're on a bit of a timeline here because we're running our money so quickly, and we want to get these ads up and running and generating revenue in a sustainable way ahead of the Q4 IPO, because without that, then the valuations could be nowhere near as high as the guys at OpenAI are expecting or hoping for.
So it sounds like they're finally maybe just getting under control the billion different things that they've been running internally to find out, okay, where are we actually making money and where are we going to be successful? And I think ad revenue is still going to be really difficult for them because platforms like Google Ads, Bing Ads, Meta Ads, they are comparatively much more sophisticated. Like, they've had so much more time in market. They know what they're doing. There's really clear analytics. People make good, at least ROAS, if not ROI, on their Google Ads. And I mean, for e-commerce businesses, for sure, they rely so heavily on their Google Ads at the moment that I think OpenAI's got a big game ahead of it if it wants to be catching up as an ad platform for those. But it kind of makes sense, I guess, if it's leaking $1 million daily on Sora for just 500,000 users, it's clearly not worth the investment for them. One of the interesting things has been this rise of Shopify agentic storefronts, which we knew Shopify was going to be releasing an integration so that there's agentic storefronts in ChatGPT. What we didn't know was that ChatGPT was going to be shutting down its instant checkout, which happened last week. And these storefronts essentially mean that users who are having a chat in ChatGPT can then check out, but they're actually checking out still via Shopify. So Shopify is still the merchant. It still owns that customer data and that actual purchase rather than ChatGPT. So is your thinking, Luke, that this is just another version of ChatGPT deciding, look, we don't want to get involved in becoming the merchant here? That's another really costly thing. There's loads of platforms like Shopify that already do this. Why are we even getting involved in those transactions?
Yeah, I agree. I think that overexcitement is probably been the name of the game from OpenAI since the very early days. And it felt like the vibe about 6 months ago was, will we even need websites? The idea was we would never have websites anymore because everything that you would do, you would just do via a chatbot. And there was going to be no need for humans ever to go on the internet itself ever again, because you can just use your ChatGPT agent to do all of your tasks for you. I think that kind of excitement has now faded a little bit, and people are realizing, what, the internet is pretty great and we like using it the way that it is. We are just going to be empowered by GPT's agents or whoever's agents to amplify our internet experience. And so this dialing back so that the checkout still happens on an actual website is part of that broader story, I think. And I think it makes sense. If you think about what Google has been doing successfully for many years, people have been using Google as part of their customer journey, right? That process of becoming customers. They interact with Google and then they visit a website and then they check out. It can be just the same with OpenAI. You use ChatGPT to find your product, and then you make the product purchase on a third-party website, perhaps with the assistance of an agent, but not directly within ChatGPT's application. So that's how I see things going, at least in the kind of next 3 to 5 years. Long term, we might be in an internet or a website-less world, but not in the short term.
My understanding is of Shopify's agentic storefront is that what it's actually going to look like is you're going to be in chat, and you're not necessarily, if you're the user, you're not necessarily going to know what is Shopify and what is ChatGPT. So it will actually be Shopify that you're checking out in, or you can navigate to the e-commerce website the way that you used to, but it's still going to be in chat. It's just all of it is owned by Shopify instead. Like the merchant process is owned by Shopify. It's not owned by ChatGPT. The interesting thing about it, though, which I think is going to cause a bit of a kickback. So at the moment, it's opt out if you're a Shopify seller and you don't want to sell via AI, you don't want agentic storefront selling via ChatGPT, you can opt out of it. But at the moment, what they're saying is cost is going to be around an additional, so on top of your Shopify fees already, 4% per transaction on ChatGPT, but no additional fees for Google's AI modes, Gemini, and Microsoft Copilot for now, at least. But I think some retailers, especially in the US where card fees are high, are going to be like, right, fine, 4% more per transaction. But I think there's going to be a lot of retailers who are like, that is huge. And I think it's going to give some people cold feet about having those Shopify agentic storefronts switched on, particularly if you are selling anything where the profit margin is kind of narrow, because that's really not leaving much left, right, at the end of the day in total. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that profit margins are razor tight in some verticals. So the idea that they can simply just slap a 4% fee on there and not get pushback from people, I think, is wishful thinking. It'll work in some cases, in some kind of more buoyant sectors and industries. They can probably handle that, but in others, I think that will put off business owners quite substantially, and leave an opening for those other competitors. You mentioned Gemini, you mentioned Copilot, OpenAI are not the only game in town, and one of the problems that they face is anywhere that they drop the ball, even slightly, they've got people nipping at their heels who, from a user perspective, people like Anthropic, and they're a perfectly good alternative if there's a financial incentive for them to use that.
Yeah, and let's talk about this market share actually, because ChatGPT at the moment is still holding the majority of the AI chatbot market share. So figures are around 64 to 68%. So around 65%, we can say, is ChatGPT dominating in terms of the amount of users and traffic that it actually gets. But Gemini has been the underdog in this race, in the sense ChatGPT was able to rise rapidly, hold a really strong user base. And Gemini has been incredibly slow, given that it's a Google product, but now has grown at the end of 2025 and early 2026, has finally managed to command around 20% of the market, which is great. But ChatGPT is still dominant. In order to overtake it, it's going to have to sustain some of that growth, and arguably it's unlikely that growth is going to go at that same rate. It's more likely that it's going to taper off. So it'd be a really slow burn in order to take ChatGPT's market share. ChatGPT would have to be continuing in decline from what is actually quite a strong position in terms of the traffic that it's actually got. And getting people, I think, to switch between different AI models, unless you are a really keen bean AI user and you have access to lots of different models in your workplace, or your workplace allows you to use lots of different models. For the average user who's just using it to search outside of work, getting people to switch between apps, getting people to switch over to Gemini from ChatGPT or to Claude from ChatGPT, I think is not that easy for the average searcher when we're not thinking about work.
I completely agree. OpenAI consciously made a play for the mass market, and they really went for being the consumer choice for for generative AI, and that has worked so far. And they're approaching 900 million weekly active users, which is phenomenal. They're close to that billion, which will be a huge achievement. That being said, we have seen quite an explosive growth from Gemini in particular. I'm really excited. We're recording at the end of March. I'm looking forward to seeing data from our clients for March, because both in January and February we saw Gemini's users rise in general on average across our client portfolio, getting up to around 20%. I'd be interested to see if we can see that hit 25% in March. So yeah, there's enough there to be spooking the guys at OpenAI, and we saw the code red go out a few months back. And the thing is the competitors are being more focused in the sense that they're going after enterprise, right? Yes, it's difficult to convince users to switch between multiple tools just for pure generative AI experience, but maybe you can convince your users who are already in a Google product, already inside a Microsoft product, to use the AI features that are integrated inside of that, and therefore they will use the ChatGPT option less, right? That, I think, is a very, very plausible scenario that could affect OpenAI's market share.
And Luke, what do you reckon ChatGPT's plan is with the market that they're actually going after? Because like you've just said, they're feeling the heat from enterprise-focused competitors. Like Claude, Anthropic owns Claude, they've gone really, really strongly after that enterprise market. They've got Claude Code, so they've got the developers using it. Now they've got Claude Cowork, which for anyone who hasn't used Cowork is essentially an agent that live can access your browser and complete tasks for you. It's definitely not perfect, but it's definitely comparably very powerful to what we're seeing with the other AI tools. It's very much a tool you would be using at work, a tool that you're using if you've got lots and lots of tasks you're trying to get out of the door, particularly if you want something doing background research for you without you needing to have a consistent manual conversation. But what's OpenAI going to do? Where are they going to go, given that enterprise has already been cornered?
Yeah, and they're going for ads, right? Everybody apart from OpenAI knew that OpenAI would gonna have to go for ads, right? Because if you're the mass market, then the way that you monetize that mass market is by serving the mass market ads. So this is why at the Super Bowl, I think it was Anthropic was able to deploy those ads that said, we're never going to have ads. The subtext being, but OpenAI will, right? Because maybe even before OpenAI realized it, Claude realized that these guys are going to have to start with the ads soon. And, that's why we're seeing the ad hires that we have seen. Because, enterprise is being nibbled at by Microsoft, by Claude. Claude Code is absolutely eating the lunch of OpenAI in terms of that power user developer market that is really important, because these are Silicon Valley guys, so that's kind of bragging rights and kudos to them. So OpenAI, it's not running out of cash, but it's possibly running out of time in which to convince the rest of the world that all of the investment in it is worthwhile, right? That's out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's wrap this up with talking a little bit about what we're seeing in our client base. So we work with businesses across B2B, B2C, e-commerce and lead generation, websites in the SME space and in the mid-market space as well, across UK and US predominantly, a little bit of Europe as well. And a lot of our clients, from what I've seen, ChatGPT is still the main platform driving traffic and conversions. And I think for businesses, there's going to be some confusion around AI search right now, because we know that Gemini is trying to grab back some of that market share. Claude, especially as you mentioned in the developer space, it's big. It's the one that gets talked about all the time. So it can be quite confusing to know what platform should we be optimizing for? Should we be optimizing for all the platforms? Is that even possible? What are you seeing, Luke, from the clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, so we are seeing still ChatGPT is the 300-pound gorilla in the room. That's maybe quite a small gorilla. Is the big gorilla in the room, and is 80% of traffic and revenue for our clients. So, and as I said, Gemini is coming up, but I think we're a long way off a scenario where Gemini is a bigger source of revenue and traffic in terms of that AI referral traffic for our clients. We're a long way off that. What we do see is that Gemini users and Claude users in particular seem to convert at a higher rate. So the traffic is more qualified, maybe more active, more engaged when it comes from those chatbots. But still, just in terms of sheer volume, the OpenAI is absolutely bossing it still in day to day, more so than even this kind of 65% number that we're seeing from reported in general. I'm seeing 80% more likely.
Huge in comparison how much ChatGPT is actually holding when it comes to traffic. The thing I would say is, if you're not sure and you haven't actually looked yet into your own analytics, take a look to see what your traffic performance looks like. So in your Google Analytics, you can set up a channel group. You can separate out the traffic that is coming through from AI search platforms, including ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, Microsoft Copilot, and all the others as well, so that you can actually see the percentage of your traffic coming from each of those. If you are using Looker Studio, which we use custom Looker Studio reports for our clients, you can set it up so that it shows a lovely pie chart, and you can see what the biggest part of the pie is for your referral traffic from those platforms, but also, more importantly, from the conversions from those platforms as well. And if you are thinking about optimizing for AI search and are not yet sure what to do, we very fortunately offer AI search audits, which take you through all of the traffic analysis, the analysis of where the conversions are coming from, an analysis of your key pages, and the priorities to actually make sure that your business is showing up in ChatGPT or the AI search platform that's most important for you and most important for your bottom line. Luke, is there anything you would like to add before we jump off of the podcast? Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, not at all. Just to echo what you said, I'd be super interested to hear from anybody who is getting a bigger share from those up and coming generative AI platforms. But yeah, the most important thing to do is find out what your customers are doing and making sure that you've got a system in place to track that. Otherwise, whatever you hear in general may not apply to you specifically. So it pays to know your numbers.
Absolutely. And if you're seeing something different, definitely let us know in the comments, because we would love to hear what businesses are experiencing on an individual level as well. All right. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. See you later.
Bye.